It was a typical Monday morning for Elon Musk. He had just wrapped up a late-night video call with his SpaceX team in Florida and was about to get some rest before another busy day overseeing Tesla's latest project. But in an instant, his routine came to an abrupt halt. As he stretched to get out of bed, an unexpected jolt of pain shot through his neck, almost as if something inside him had snapped. The sharp sensation made him wince and freeze for a moment. The pain was unlike anything he'd felt before. It wasn't a simple muscle ache. It was deep, intense, and incapacitating. His first thought? Maybe it was just the stress catching up with him, a reminder of the relentless hours he'd been putting in for the last few months. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? But then the pain didn't go away. It didn't ease up. It only got worse, and soon, even basic movements became impossible. Elon tried to brush it off, but the sharp, radiating discomfort was undeniable. His neck felt stiff, like it was locked in place. He couldn't turn his head to look at his phone without experiencing a wave of dizziness. His first instinct was to power through it. He'd done it before, hadn't he? Pushed through exhaustion, overworked himself, and faced challenges head-on. But something about this pain felt different. It wasn't just physical. It was starting to take a toll on his mental clarity. His mind felt foggy, his focus slipping. Maybe I just need some rest, Elon thought to himself, trying to dismiss the worry that gnawed at him. But even as he dismissed it, something inside him told him this wasn't just another minor issue. The pain continued to worsen throughout the day, and by the evening, it was no longer something he could ignore. As CEO of Tesla, SpaceX, and several other ventures, Elon Musk had lived his life at a breakneck pace, always balancing the weight of impossible expectations. Yet, for the first time, he began to realize the limits of his own body. A small voice inside him whispered, "Is it possible that you've been pushing too hard?" The next morning, a quick phone call to his personal physician was enough to set his next course of action in motion. An emergency appointment was made with a specialist. The doctor suspected a serious issue with his spine that could be linked to stress-induced tension, possibly even a herniated disc. Elon didn't want to hear it. He dismissed the warning, pushing it out of his mind, just like he had so many other warnings before. But this time, it wasn't going away. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As the day wore on, the pain persisted, growing more intense and spreading further down his back. And then, like a heavy cloud over his empire, the inevitable truth began to sink in. The man who had conquered the skies and revolutionized electric cars was suddenly faced with something far more personal, something he couldn't fix with money, technology, or willpower alone. He had no choice but to face the reality. He needed help, but how did it get to this point? Was this the breaking point for the man who had built so much? Could the same ambitious drive that had propelled him to unimaginable success now be his downfall? What happens when someone like Elon Musk, someone who has always been in control, realizes just how little control he actually has over his own body? And, most pressing of all, could this health scare jeopardize everything he had worked so tirelessly to achieve? The journey ahead would test not just his body, but his very soul. Elon Musk wasn't always the towering figure in the world of tech and innovation. Long before SpaceX, Tesla, or the ambitions of colonizing Mars, there was a boy named Elon, growing up in the quiet town of Pretoria, South Africa. The world that Elon would come to shape was far from his mind as a child, as he spent his early years immersed in books, quietly observing the world around him. He was the kind of kid who never quite fit in. While his classmates were out playing soccer or hanging out at the mall, Elon was buried in books, science fiction novels, encyclopedias, and, later, the emerging world of technology captivated him. He was a dreamer, but not in the typical sense. He didn't dream about grand adventures or fairy tales. His dreams were more practical, more grandiose. Elon dreamed of changing the world. His father, Elon Musk, was an engineer and entrepreneur with a sharp, often cold demeanor. His mother, May, was a model and dietitian with a nurturing and warm presence. Elon often felt caught between these two worlds. While his father was successful, he also had a complicated relationship with him, marked by estrangement and emotional distance. His parents divorced when he was a teenager, adding to the complexities of his upbringing. Despite this, Elon maintained a deep admiration for his mother, who encouraged his intellectual curiosity and relentlessly pushed him to pursue his interests. In school, Elon wasn't popular. He was the target of bullying, often taunted for his awkwardness and his peculiar interests. His classmates didn't understand him, and he didn't understand why they didn't share his excitement for things like computers, rockets, and artificial intelligence. He wasn't just a nerd. He was an obsessive innovator before he even understood what innovation truly meant. His mind constantly raced with ideas, and at times, he felt completely isolated from the world around him. But all that isolation gave way to a burning ambition. In his teenage years, Elon decided that he would leave South Africa for a better future. America, he believed, was the land where anyone could make their dreams come true. He moved to Canada for a time to attend Queen's University and then transferred to the University of Pennsylvania in the U.S., where he earned degrees in physics and economics. From there, Elon's journey took him to Silicon Valley, where he founded Zip2, a software company that provided business directories and maps to newspapers. It wasn't long before he sold Zip2 for nearly $300 million and founded X.com, which would later become PayPal. His obsession with the future, with advancing technology to better humanity, had begun to take shape. But even with the financial success that came from PayPal, it wasn't money that drove him. It was always the bigger picture, the possibility of changing the world. Elon had a vision that few could understand, even fewer could grasp, and most believed to be impossible. He wanted to build a sustainable future, not just through electric cars, but through space exploration. His dream of Mars wasn't about colonizing another planet for the sake of it. It was about ensuring the survival of the human race. Yet, this dream came with its own set of challenges. As Musk entered the world of space exploration with SpaceX, the stakes became higher and the pressure more intense. After the initial failures of his rockets, there were days when it seemed like Musk might not be able to hold on. Tesla's electric car line faced enormous scrutiny. He was constantly attacked by media, by investors, and by naysayers. People who believed he was chasing a pipe dream. He was a man on the edge, pushing limits that seemed too vast, too impossible. Elon's intense drive, while admired by many, came at a cost. His personal relationships were often strained, his social life non-existent, and his health took a back seat to the demands of his businesses. But for Elon, the work was never just about him. It was always about the future. If he had to push himself to the limit to make a difference, so be it. The world needed change, and he wasn't about to wait for someone else to make it happen. Fast forward to today. Elon had become one of the wealthiest and most influential individuals in the world. His companies were not just successful, they were revolutionary. Tesla wasn't just a car company. It was a symbol of the future of clean energy. SpaceX had begun to redefine the possibilities of space exploration, and with each new launch, Elon pushed the boundaries of what humanity could achieve. But for all the headlines, all the milestones, and the accolades, something was happening that no one could see. The very drive that made Elon Musk the man he was, the thing that propelled him to change the world, was beginning to take its toll. His body had been his constant companion, the tool that powered his mind. But over time, it had begun to break down. His neck pain was just a warning, a small crack in the armor of a man who had always believed that nothing could stop him. Now, as he sat in a sterile doctor's office, listening to the specialist explain the severity of his condition, a new reality began to set in. The man who had defied the odds in so many ways was facing a new, unfamiliar challenge. A challenge that didn't have a blueprint for success, no roadmap to follow. The outcome wasn't in his hands. "Mr. Musk, if you don't get this treated, it could lead to serious complications," the doctor said, breaking Elon's train of thought. For a moment, the weight of those words sank in. He wasn't invincible. The empire he had built, the revolution he had spearheaded, it all rested on the fragile shoulders of a man who, for the first time in his life, had no control over the outcome. Elon didn't know it yet, but this moment, this diagnosis, would change everything. The man who had once been fearless in his pursuit of progress now faced a battle that would test him in ways he had never imagined. As he left the doctor's office, his mind raced with thoughts of what the future might hold. But one thing was clear: the road ahead would not be easy. This was no longer about Mars or electric cars or even making a name for himself. It was about something much more personal. It was about survival. The following days after his doctor's appointment were a blur. Musk tried to maintain his usual routine, pushing through the pain as best he could. His body, however, had different plans. Every movement became a challenge. Whether it was sitting through a board meeting at Tesla or engaging in a video call with SpaceX engineers, the pain gnawed at him in a way that wouldn't be ignored. He could no longer simply push through it. The neck pain was relentless, and it was spreading. What started as a discomfort was now a persistent ache that shot down his spine, affecting his arms and even his grip. Elon's mind, which had always been sharp and focused, began to feel cloudy. Simple tasks became harder. Writing a simple email felt like a monumental effort. He started to miss meetings, cancel calls, and even delay some important deadlines. The Musk that the world had come to know, laser-focused, always present, was starting to fade. SpaceX's upcoming rocket launch, one of the most important in the company's history, was just around the corner, and Elon was losing his edge. The anxiety that had always been his driving force now worked against him. The familiar sense of control that had always come with knowing how to solve any problem seemed distant. This time, the solution wasn't a matter of intellect or hard work. It was something deeper, something he didn't have the power to change with will alone. Maybe it's just stress, he told himself, trying to push past the mental fog. You've been working too much. Everything will be fine once you rest. But even as he said the words, he knew they weren't true. There was a deeper concern gnawing at him. He'd never been one to stop, to slow down. But now, for the first time, his body was telling him something he couldn't ignore. You need to slow down. A few more days passed in this half-realized state, where he would ignore the pain for hours and then collapse into bed, physically and mentally exhausted. The thought of taking time off was foreign to him. He was the man who thrived on productivity, on innovation, on constant movement. Time off felt like failure. But then came the moment when things couldn't be ignored anymore. Musk was standing in the SpaceX hangar, overseeing final preparations for the rocket launch. As he reviewed the plans, a sudden wave of dizziness hit him. The room spun, his vision blurred, and his legs felt like they could give out at any moment. He grabbed the edge of a nearby table to steady himself. His breath came out in shallow gasps, but he kept his composure, not wanting to alarm anyone. He smiled at the engineers nearby, pushing the moment of vulnerability aside as best he could. But inside, his heart raced. This isn't just stress, he realized. This is something else. After that, the cracks started to show. Elon began to pull back from some of his daily responsibilities. He delegated more, something that felt almost impossible for him. But the pain, both physical and mental, made it clear that he could no longer do everything himself. At first, the people around him didn't notice much of a change. They saw a more subdued Elon, quieter than usual, but he remained the same eccentric, brilliant leader that had driven Tesla's success and pioneered the future of space exploration. But behind closed doors, the cracks were widening. Elon had always believed in his ability to push the boundaries of the possible, to outwork and outthink everyone around him. But now, his body was pushing back. The idea that he could simply will his way through this issue was becoming increasingly unrealistic. His doctor's warnings echoed in his mind. He'd ignored them for as long as he could, but now they felt like a ticking clock. The pain was no longer just physical. It was wearing him down emotionally. He hadn't been able to sleep properly in weeks, and when he did sleep, it was restless and fragmented. The toll it was taking on his mood was undeniable. He snapped at a few employees, something that was rare for him, and even started losing patience with his family. It wasn't just that his neck hurt anymore. It was the toll on his sense of self. He was the man who thrived under pressure, who worked tirelessly to change the world, who led by example. But now, the very force that had driven him to greatness, the endless drive, the non-stop work ethic, was betraying him. The ideas that had once come easily now seemed distant, and the clarity of thought that had been his greatest asset was becoming harder and harder to access. SpaceX's mission was in jeopardy, and for the first time, Musk wasn't sure he could make it through the final preparations. His company, his passion, was teetering on the edge. Could he push through the pain, the fog, the fear of failing at the one thing he had worked toward for so long? More than just the launch was on the line. His health was at a breaking point. There was no amount of willpower that could fix this. No number of sleepless nights or caffeine-fueled days could cure the problem. It was time for a choice. The solution was clear, but it was one that terrified him. He needed to stop. He couldn't keep ignoring the signs. The pain, the fatigue, the emotional toll. It was all pointing in the same direction. Musk had to face it head-on. It was time to slow down, to seek help, to get better. But even as the thought crossed his mind, it felt impossible. For years, his identity had been tied to his work, to his companies, to his relentless pursuit of innovation. To stop, to take a break, felt like admitting defeat. What would happen if he gave in? Would his companies fall apart without him? Would people see him as weak? Elon sat alone in his office late that night, the only light coming from the soft glow of his desk lamp. The pain in his neck was unbearable, and the weight of his responsibilities felt like a mountain on his shoulders. But for the first time, he realized something. He was only human, and that realization was the first step toward understanding what he would have to do next. The days following Elon Musk's growing realization were filled with uncertainty. He was no stranger to the idea of sacrifice. He had already given so much of himself to his companies. But this was different. The thing that had always kept him going, the thing that had allowed him to take risks, fail, and rise again, was no longer there. His health had become a barrier he couldn't just bypass or power through. Sitting in his office late one evening, the weight of the decision before him felt almost paralyzing. His body was rebelling against him, but his mind was not ready to let go of control. Maybe just a few more days, he thought, trying to convince himself that things would get better on their own. Maybe a little rest, a few adjustments to my routine, and I'll be back to normal. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just another battle to fight. His body was sending him a clear message. You can't go on like this. It wasn't just his neck anymore. The fog in his mind had thickened, and with each passing day, he found it harder to make decisions, to focus on the small details that once came easily. His frustration with himself was palpable. The person who had redefined entire industries, the person who had transformed multiple sectors of the economy, now found himself facing a problem he couldn't fix with his typical tenacity. The doctor had advised him to take time off, to address the issue seriously before it became a major problem. The risk of a herniated disc leading to permanent damage or even paralysis was too real to ignore. But even as the words echoed in his head, Musk couldn't shake the feeling that stepping away from his work would mean the unraveling of everything he had built. His companies were thriving, but they needed him. They had always needed him. The board meetings, the public appearances, the future plans, these all relied on his presence, his vision, his drive. To take a step back now felt like jeopardizing the very future he had worked so tirelessly to create. Then there was the looming rocket launch. SpaceX was about to make history with its next mission, and Musk had poured his heart and soul into this project. His name was synonymous with the success of his companies, and this was supposed to be the culmination of years of work. The thought of missing it, of letting someone else take the reins, made his chest tighten. But at the same time, the thought of continuing to push forward, of sacrificing his own well-being for the sake of a company, felt more like self-destruction than sacrifice. In a quiet moment, as he sat in the dim light of his office, Elon took a deep breath. The tension in his neck flared again, but this time, it was different. This time, it was a reminder, a final warning. He needed to make a choice. Elon picked up the phone, his hand trembling slightly as he dialed the number of his personal assistant. "Set up a meeting with the board tomorrow," he said, his voice low but firm. "It's time to take a step back." The words felt heavy as they left his lips, but they were final. This was no longer a question of whether he could keep going. It was a question of whether he could survive if he didn't stop. The decision was made. The next day, Elon sat across from his board members. The usual faces, the usual handshakes, the usual sense of control. Only this time, something felt different. The room seemed quieter, the air thicker. Musk had always been the one who called the shots, who set the pace. But now, he was the one facing the consequences of that pace. The years of relentless work, the late nights, the constant pressure. It had taken a toll, and it had brought him to this moment. He looked at the faces around the table, the people who had helped him build his empire. These were the people who had believed in him when others doubted. They knew the gravity of the decision he was about to make. "Gentlemen," Elon began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion, "I need to step back for a while." The room fell silent. There were murmurs, concerned looks, and questions. Everyone knew the stakes. The board understood that Musk was not someone who made decisions lightly, and they knew that this wasn't just a temporary break. This was a personal crisis for a man who had always been in control. But even they could see the toll it had taken on him. "I've been pushing myself beyond what my body can handle," Elon continued, his voice growing more candid. "And it's starting to affect everything, from my health to the decisions I make. If I don't address this now, I risk losing it all. And I'm not just talking about my companies. I'm talking about my life. I can't afford to ignore this any longer." The board members exchanged glances, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. They knew that Musk's decision would have a ripple effect on everything. But they also knew that the only way to ensure his long-term success, both for himself and for his companies, was for him to heal, to take a step back and recover. "I'm putting in place a plan for transition," Musk said, sounding more confident now. "But I need your support, and I need you to trust that this is the right thing to do." The room fell into a quiet contemplation, and it felt like an eternity before anyone spoke. Finally, the chairperson spoke. "Elon, we've always known that you've been pushing yourself to the limit, but you've made the right decision. We'll make this work. Take the time you need to heal, and we'll ensure that the company stays on course." With that, the decision was made. Elon Musk would step back temporarily, allowing his trusted team to take the reins while he focused on his recovery. As he left the meeting, Elon's mind was a whirlwind. The decision felt right, but it also felt like an impossible sacrifice. He had spent his life building these companies, and now he was stepping away from them. But as the pain in his neck flared again, he realized that it was no longer just about him. It was about his health, his family, and his future. It was time for a different kind of journey, one that would take him into the unknown territory of healing and self-discovery. But the real question was, could he come back from this? Could he regain the strength he needed, both physically and mentally, to lead once again? The journey ahead would not be easy, but it was one that he had to take. The weeks that followed were a blur of doctor visits, physical therapy sessions, and long stretches of time spent in quiet solitude. Musk, who had once been the embodiment of perpetual motion, now found himself constrained by his own body. His neck was the center of his world, not in the way it used to be, where every decision, every conversation, revolved around his companies, his plans, his dreams. Now, each day was a struggle to simply sit upright, to not lose himself in the intense pain that radiated through his body. At first, it felt like a temporary setback, a break, even something he could easily bounce back from, just as he had bounced back from the many failures and challenges that had come before. But as the days dragged on, the realization that this wasn't just another challenge began to sink in. This was different. His body was no longer something that could be controlled or ignored. It had taken on a life of its own, and he had to face it. Elon was no longer the master of his own fate. His own limitations, both physical and emotional, had caught up with him. The things he had once taken for granted, the strength of his body, the clarity of his mind, were slipping away. And as they did, so too did his sense of control. This was uncharted territory. Sitting in his spacious but quiet home, Elon gazed out the window, watching the evening sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, but it all seemed distant to him. The grand plans for Mars, the ambitions for a sustainable Earth, the mission to reshape the future. All of it felt so far removed from where he was now. Instead of thinking about the next big idea, He was consumed by the pain in his neck, the limited mobility, and the gnawing fear that he was no longer the person he once was. For the first time in years, Musk allowed himself to truly feel the weight of everything that had happened. His relentless drive had brought him to the peak of success, but it had also left him isolated. He hadn't realized how much of his identity had been tied to his work until it was no longer a constant. His days used to be filled with meetings, strategy sessions, and constant movement. Now, he had nothing to fill the void except for the endless cycle of medical appointments, stretching exercises, and moments of doubt. Is this the end? He asked himself quietly, though the question lingered in the air without an answer. The idea of being physically incapacitated, of being unable to contribute to his companies, felt like a death of sorts, a slow unraveling of the very essence of who he had been. For someone who had always been so driven by purpose, the feeling of being rendered helpless was devastating. But then came the moment when everything changed. One evening, as he sat with a physical therapist working through the stretches and exercises, Musk felt something shift within him. A small change, but one that carried immense weight. It wasn't much. A slight reduction in the pain. A brief moment when his neck didn't feel like a lead weight dragging him down. It was subtle, but it was there. His therapist noticed too. "That's progress," she said, her voice encouraging. "It's slow, but you're getting there." For the first time in weeks, Musk allowed himself to feel something different. Hope. Hope wasn't something he'd given himself permission to feel in a long time. He had always been focused on the bigger picture, on the monumental achievements that lay ahead. But here he was, facing the most personal and vulnerable challenge of his life. And for the first time, there was a flicker of light in the darkness. The small victories started to accumulate. Musk was still far from fully recovered, but the pain had dulled. He had moments where he could move without the excruciating twinges, moments when his mind didn't feel quite so foggy. And with each small win, something else began to shift inside of him. He realized that perhaps this was not the end of his journey, but a new chapter in it. A chapter where he would have to learn to balance his work, his ambition, and his health. What he had once believed was an impossible choice, to slow down, to give up control, was now becoming a lesson. This wasn't just about healing his body. It was about healing his mind. It was about realizing that he didn't have to sacrifice everything in the pursuit of his dreams. In a moment of clarity, Musk knew something had to change. He couldn't keep pushing himself into the ground. The work would always be there, but his health, his body, was something that needed care and attention, not endless wear and tear. The companies he had built, SpaceX, Tesla, were strong. They had solid foundations. They didn't rely solely on him. And even more importantly, Musk was learning how to step back and trust the incredible people he had surrounded himself with. As he sat in the quiet of his home, reflecting on this new understanding, Musk made a promise to himself. He wasn't going to just survive this setback. He was going to grow from it. He was going to take the lessons learned during this painful time and use them to fuel the next phase of his life. Not just as a visionary entrepreneur, but as a man who had faced his own limitations and found a way to overcome them. It was then, in that moment of quiet realization, that he understood what was truly at stake. Not just his companies, not just his ambitions, but his future. His health would be his foundation moving forward. He would need to be strong enough to carry both his dreams and his well-being forward into whatever came next. The weeks that followed were a slow, but steady journey toward recovery. Musk's life had drastically shifted. The constant whirl of phone calls, meetings, and deadlines had been replaced with quiet, mindful routines that were almost foreign to him. Every day, he focused on the basics: stretching, strengthening exercises, and, most importantly, listening to his body. He had always been a man of action, of forward momentum, but now, the focus was on patience. It was something Musk had rarely given himself permission to do. To simply stop. To let his body heal at its own pace without the constant pressure to perform, to produce, to achieve. It wasn't easy. Even though the physical pain had decreased, the mental challenge was more intense than ever. The feeling of being sidelined, of no longer being the central force in his companies, gnawed at him. Musk was used to being the one people looked to for answers, the one who set the tone and charted the course. Now, he had to trust others to take the lead. It was a humbling experience. SpaceX and Tesla both continued their missions without him, and while he remained in contact with his teams, it was clear that his absence was having a visible effect. There was a quiet undercurrent of unease within the companies. The news of Musk's health scare had spread, and there was the looming question: what happens if he's not able to come back? For the first time, Musk began to think deeply about what would happen if he couldn't return to the fast-paced, high-stakes world he had built. He had always been the face of innovation and success, the driving force behind both companies' cultures. But could he step away completely and still maintain his legacy? During one of his quieter moments, sitting in the backyard of his home, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the night sky, Musk allowed himself to reflect. He had always believed that his personal identity was inseparable from his work. But now, he saw that it wasn't just about the companies or the projects. It was about the people who believed in him, the teams he had built, and the values they shared. He had created a culture of innovation, of resilience, of dreaming big. And now, he saw that the companies were bigger than any one person. SpaceX wasn't just about him reaching Mars. It was about the team of engineers and scientists working tirelessly to make that dream a reality. Tesla wasn't just about building electric cars. It was about challenging the very way people thought about sustainable energy. And both companies would continue to innovate long after he was gone. As this realization sank in, Musk felt a profound shift. The pressure he had always felt to be everywhere, to do everything, began to ease. The belief that he was the only one who could steer his companies was gradually replaced by a growing confidence in the leadership he had cultivated. Elon Musk wasn't alone anymore. He had a team of talented, dedicated individuals who believed in the mission just as much as he did. The weight of the world didn't have to rest solely on his shoulders. It was time to trust the people around him and embrace the new reality that was emerging. Maybe this was supposed to happen, Musk thought one afternoon as he sat in a meeting with his leadership team, now fully present in the moment. His team was discussing the future of the Starship project, plans for future missions to Mars, potential commercial partnerships, and space exploration milestones. Musk felt a renewed sense of peace, watching his engineers speak passionately about their work. The mission, the vision, the legacy, they were all still there, still burning bright. His role had changed. He wasn't stepping away completely, but he was no longer the all-consuming center of attention. He would lead from a distance, focusing more on the long-term vision and making decisions that would ensure the future of SpaceX and Tesla. The experience had also reshaped his perspective on life itself. He realized that his health wasn't just a personal issue. It was an integral part of his overall ability to function as a leader. If he didn't take care of himself, how could he continue to care for the people and projects he loved so much? With this newfound understanding, Musk began to rebuild not just his physical strength but his sense of balance. He allowed himself to spend time with his family, to connect with friends, and to rediscover parts of himself that had been neglected for years. He started doing things for the sake of doing them, rather than for the sake of achieving something. It was a small, but important change in mindset. Still, his health remained a priority. Every day, Musk continued his therapy and medical treatments. Each small improvement gave him a sense of hope. He wasn't back to 100% yet, but he was getting there. And with each passing week, he was learning how to integrate this new reality into his life in a way that felt sustainable. As he stood on the balcony of his home one evening, watching the sunset, Musk took a deep breath. The world hadn't stopped while he had been away, and in many ways, it had moved forward in ways he had never imagined. SpaceX was preparing to launch its most ambitious mission yet. Tesla was gaining momentum with its renewable energy projects. The world was changing, and his role was still a crucial part of it, but no longer in the way he had once envisioned. "I'm not done yet," Musk thought to himself, smiling for the first time in weeks. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain: he would be different. His journey wasn't just about the rockets or the cars or the technologies. It was about understanding the balance between ambition and health, between work and life. And that, perhaps, was the most important lesson of all. As he looked up at the stars, Musk felt a sense of peace. The road ahead would be long, but he was ready for it. He wasn't just going to survive this. He was going to thrive. Elon Musk's recovery was progressing, but the challenges were far from over. The early days had been filled with small victories, less pain, more mobility, and a renewed sense of hope. But as he regained some strength, another issue began to surface, one that was even harder to confront: the issue of trust. Despite his growing understanding of the need for balance, the decision to step back from day-to-day operations had not been an easy one. Musk had always prided himself on his hands-on leadership style. He thrived in the chaos of innovation, constantly pushing the envelope. His companies were reflections of him, of his vision, and of his tireless drive. Now, as he began to spend more time away from the office, he was faced with the challenge of trusting others to carry on without him. He had delegated tasks before, of course, but this felt different. The stakes were higher. The future of his companies that had become household names, was now in the hands of others, and that knowledge created a tight knot in his chest. It wasn't just the leadership teams that Musk had to trust. It was the entire organizational structure. SpaceX and Tesla had grown into global giants. The people working on these projects were some of the brightest minds in the world, but even so, he couldn't help but wonder, would they be able to navigate the direction I've set without losing momentum? Musk had spent countless hours building a culture of innovation where failure was just a stepping stone to success. But the idea of someone else stepping into his shoes felt like a gamble. What if the spark of his vision faded without him there to light the fire? He knew, deep down, that he couldn't keep everything in his hands. The companies had to run without him if they were to thrive in the long term. And yet, as he watched his trusted team make decisions in his absence, Musk felt the creeping doubt. It was during one particular meeting with the leadership of SpaceX that his concerns came to a head. The team had gathered to discuss the next phase of the Mars mission, a project that had been his personal passion for years. The plans were ambitious, as always, but there was a change in tone. As the team discussed their progress and timelines, Elon noticed something he hadn't expected: a sense of hesitancy in the room. The usual confidence wasn't there. As the conversation continued, Musk couldn't help but feel that the team was holding back, unsure of the direction they were taking without his direct input. This wasn't just about technical decisions, it was about leadership. He could see the subtle signs of doubt in the eyes of his engineers, the way they glanced at each other before speaking, the pauses in their conversations. It hit him harder than he expected. He had always prided himself on building a strong, independent team. But now, in his absence, it seemed as though the team was struggling to find its footing without his constant guidance. Musk had been silent during most of the meeting, observing quietly, but the growing tension in the room reached a boiling point. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Why is everyone so quiet?" he asked, his gaze sweeping the room. "Is there something I'm missing here? Do you have doubts about the direction we're taking?" A moment of uncomfortable silence filled the room before one of the senior engineers, a longtime collaborator, spoke up. "Elon, we've got a solid plan. But without you leading it day to day, there's a level of uncertainty. We're all trying to follow the vision you set, but we can't help but wonder if we're truly on the right path without your presence." Musk felt a sharp pang in his chest. It wasn't that he didn't trust the people around him. They were all incredibly talented. But his absence was creating an invisible barrier, one that even the most brilliant minds could feel. He took a deep breath. This was it, the moment when he would have to make a choice. The room waited for him to respond. He could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of his decisions settling in. For years, Musk had been the driving force behind every major decision. And now, for the first time, he was faced with the reality that he couldn't do it all anymore. "Listen," Musk began, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts racing in his mind. "I know this is difficult, but trust is the key. Trust in yourselves. Trust in the mission. You've all been handpicked for your expertise and your vision. You've got what it takes to keep this going without me micromanaging every step." The silence in the room lingered, but Musk could feel the shift. His words, simple yet firm, seemed to open a door. The team was listening. "I may not be in the trenches with you every day, but the work we're doing is bigger than me. It's bigger than any of us individually. And if you trust in that, if you trust in each other, we will get this done." There was a moment of quiet contemplation. Then, one by one, the engineers nodded, their expressions changing. The hesitation that had lingered in the air seemed to dissipate. They understood. They could feel it. I've put my trust in you all because I believe in your abilities. Now, it's time to let that trust work. Lead. Innovate. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, because it's those mistakes that will lead to success. As the meeting concluded, Musk felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The team had listened. They had heard him. For the first time, he could truly say that he was starting to trust them in a way he hadn't been able to before. It wasn't going to be easy, but Musk knew that this was the only way forward. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about the future, the collective vision, and the team that would carry that vision into the next phase. For all the talk of Mars and electric cars, the real challenge Elon Musk had been facing wasn't just about launching rockets or building better vehicles. It was about learning how to let go, how to trust the people around him and allow them to lead without his constant presence. It was a test he wasn't sure he was ready for, but one he knew was essential for his health, his companies, and his future. Elon Musk's decision to take a step back from the everyday operations of SpaceX and Tesla wasn't without its challenges. In fact, the early days of delegating responsibilities felt like a test, both for him and for his teams. He had built his companies from the ground up, making every crucial decision, and now, he was entrusting the future of his greatest achievements to others. It was an uncomfortable transition. He couldn't deny that there were moments when the urge to step back in, to take control, overwhelmed him. It was in the quiet hours of the evening, when the world seemed to be spinning faster than he could keep up with, that the anxiety began to creep in. What if they fail? He thought. What if they can't carry on without me? But every time those doubts surfaced, Musk had to remind himself, this was the only way forward. His recovery was still ongoing, and he couldn't afford to put everything on hold. His body needed time to heal, and his mind needed to adjust to a new reality, one where he wasn't at the helm of every ship. The fate of SpaceX and Tesla couldn't rest solely on his shoulders. He needed to trust the systems he had built, the people who shared his vision, and the very foundations of the companies he had created. So, Elon took a deep breath, and with it, took the leap. He would let go, even if it felt like he was stepping into an abyss. The first few weeks were rocky. SpaceX and Tesla had momentum, but there was no denying that the absence of Musk's direct involvement was felt. His engineers, his managers, his teams, everyone was adjusting to the new way of working. The air was thick with uncertainty, even though the projects were moving forward. And yet, something incredible started to happen. The people he had surrounded himself with, the very people who had been handpicked to embody his vision, began to shine in ways he hadn't expected. They started to make decisions with confidence, to take ownership of their projects, to push the boundaries of what was possible. At SpaceX, the Mars mission was moving full steam ahead. Musk's leadership team, led by Gwynne Shotwell, was working seamlessly, guiding the next phase of the Starship project. They were making breakthroughs in ways Musk had hoped for, but never fully imagined without his constant oversight. New technologies were being developed, and the dream of Mars seemed closer than ever before. Meanwhile, at Tesla, the production of electric vehicles was ramping up. The team was making strides in battery technology, and the goal of reducing carbon emissions worldwide seemed more attainable than ever. Musk's absence didn't halt the relentless drive for progress. It allowed the company to expand and innovate without the constant pressure of being under his watchful eye. The team was given the space to think, to innovate, and to experiment. In those quiet moments of reflection, Musk began to realize that this new chapter wasn't just about delegating tasks, it was about empowering others. He had always been a visionary, driven by a singular goal, to change the world. But now, he was seeing the power of collective action in a new light. His role wasn't to micromanage or control. It was to inspire, to provide the framework, and to allow his teams the freedom to innovate within that framework. He had created the infrastructure, the teams, the culture, the vision, and now, those elements were carrying the companies forward without him having to be involved in every decision. For the first time, Musk began to see just how crucial his decision to delegate was, not just for his recovery, but for the long-term health of his companies. The companies he had built would no longer be a reflection of his every move. They would be a living testament to the power of collaboration, to the vision that others shared with him. But the journey was far from over. Musk's healing process continued, and while the companies were thriving, there were still moments when he felt disconnected. It was in those moments of quiet doubt that he found solace in the progress his teams were making. They didn't need him to drive every decision. They had become leaders in their own right, and Musk could see that. One afternoon, while catching up on emails and video calls, Musk received a call from Gwynne Shotwell. The SpaceX team had just completed a successful test flight of Starship, one of the most critical milestones in the Mars mission. Musk couldn't contain the excitement in his voice as he congratulated her. "That's incredible," he said, his voice full of pride. "You all did it. It's happening. We're closer to Mars than we've ever been." Shotwell's voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable edge of triumph in her tone. "Elon, it's because of you. Your vision has driven us this far. And now, we're pushing beyond what we thought was possible. This is your dream, but we're all in it together." Musk smiled softly to himself. There it was again, the realization that this was never just about him. It was about the collective spirit, the team that had been built, and the shared belief in a future beyond the horizon. The success of the test flight wasn't just a victory for SpaceX, it was a victory for the vision he had nurtured, the culture he had cultivated. It was a powerful reminder that leadership wasn't just about holding the reins. It was about knowing when to let go and watching others take the reins in their own way. For the first time in a long time, Musk felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not just from the achievements of his companies, but from the knowledge that he had built something lasting, something that could thrive even in his absence. He didn't need to be there every step of the way. He had done his job in creating the foundation, and now, the future of SpaceX and Tesla was in capable hands. As the call ended and Musk leaned back in his chair, he couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The journey had been hard, but it was also one of the most transformative experiences of his life. He had learned that letting go wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a powerful testament to the strength of his vision and the people who shared it. For the first time in a long time, Elon Musk could truly say that he was ready for the next chapter, not just as a visionary entrepreneur, but as a man who had found balance in the chaos and trust in the power of delegation. As the months passed, Musk's recovery continued at a steady pace. The physical pain had diminished, and his energy levels were beginning to return. But it wasn't just his body that was healing, it was his mind. The mental shift he had undergone during this period of reflection and recovery had been profound. He no longer felt like the sole guardian of his companies. Instead, he felt something deeper, a sense of relief, of gratitude, and of pride in the legacy he had built. But with this newfound peace came an unexpected question. What happens when it's all over? The reality of his legacy began to loom larger in his thoughts. Musk had always been driven by the desire to change the world, to build a future for humanity beyond Earth, to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. His companies were more than just businesses. They were movements, each one a beacon of the future he envisioned. SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, and the Boring Company. Each of these ventures was a reflection of his relentless pursuit of something greater than himself. But as he watched the successes unfold without him at the center of every decision, he found himself wondering, was I ever really meant to be the one to carry this all the way? It was a question that seemed to echo in the quiet moments of reflection, when the adrenaline of the work had faded and the truth about his own mortality began to settle in. No matter how many rockets he launched or how many electric cars hit the road, the truth remained. He was human. He had limits. The clock was ticking, and the future would eventually belong to someone else. During one of his solitary walks in the garden, a thought hit him with startling clarity. Perhaps it's not about me at all. He stopped in his tracks, looking up at the sky as the wind rustled through the trees. The stars above felt close, like they were within reach. But they were also a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the fleeting nature of one human life. Maybe, Musk mused aloud, it's not about how long I can hold on to these companies. Maybe it's about how long they can last after I'm gone. For the first time in years, Musk felt the weight of his own legacy. Not in the sense of personal accomplishment, but in the realization that his true legacy was in the work he had done to lay the groundwork for a future that didn't depend on him. SpaceX's Mars mission would continue without him. Tesla's revolution in electric vehicles would carry on, growing into something far greater than he could have ever imagined. He had spent so much of his life thinking about what he could achieve, but now he was beginning to understand the deeper question. Why did it matter? It was no longer about building a monument to himself. It was about creating a movement, a change in the fabric of humanity, one that would endure long after he was gone. His name would always be associated with these revolutionary companies, but the future of Earth and humanity would belong to the people who would carry the torch forward. The question of his mortality began to settle into his bones, not as a source of anxiety, but as a grounding force. He realized that, in many ways, his health scare had been a gift, a reminder of the fragility of life, but also of its preciousness. It had forced him to face the one thing he had always avoided, the idea of not being around forever. As Musk reflected on this, he thought of the young engineers and scientists he had mentored over the years. They were the ones who would take these ideas forward, pushing the boundaries of space exploration, sustainable energy, and artificial intelligence. They were the ones who would face the challenges of the future, not as his employees, but as leaders in their own right. In a meeting with his executive team, Musk addressed this new phase of his journey. His voice was calm, but there was a deep, quiet intensity in his words. "I've spent a long time building something, but the truth is," he said, looking each team member in the eye, "what we're building here is bigger than all of us. It's bigger than me. We're laying the foundation for a future that will outlast our lifetimes, and that's what matters." The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Musk had never been one for speeches or grandiose declarations. His leadership style had always been action-oriented, driven by relentless progress. But today, in this moment, something had shifted. His perspective on leadership, on legacy, had evolved. Musk had built these companies to push the boundaries of what was possible. He had defied the odds, shattered norms, and transformed industries. But now, he saw that true leadership wasn't about holding on tightly. It was about letting go, about trusting others to take the reins, and about knowing that the work he had started would continue to grow in ways he had never imagined. As the meeting wrapped up, Musk's team left the room with a new sense of resolve. They had always believed in his vision, but now they believed in their own ability to shape the future. And so, as the world moved forward, Musk allowed himself to step back further. Knowing that the foundations of SpaceX, Tesla, and all the ventures he had created were strong enough to stand on their own. For the first time, he could see the true meaning of his legacy. It wasn't in the accomplishments or the accolades. It was in the way his companies had empowered others to dream big, to challenge the status quo, and to build a future that was greater than any one individual. And as Musk looked toward the stars, he smiled, not because of what he had achieved, but because of what he had set in motion, a movement that would last long after he was gone. The days that followed Musk's emotional realization were quiet, reflective ones. He had come to terms with the weight of his legacy and the way forward for his companies. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that he had created something much larger than himself, a movement that was capable of carrying on without him. Yet, even with this newfound peace, the question of the future still loomed over him. Musk had spent much of his life focused on the next big thing. His mind had always been occupied with the limitless potential of space exploration, electric vehicles, and artificial intelligence. But now, he had to ask himself, what next? He had laid the groundwork for some of the most ambitious projects in human history. SpaceX was poised to carry humans to Mars, and Tesla was leading the charge toward a sustainable future. But Musk knew that his role in these missions was gradually becoming less about the day-to-day and more about the long-term vision. As he watched his companies continue to thrive, he found himself contemplating the future in a new way. The thought of retirement was something that had never crossed his mind, but he couldn't ignore the sense that he had reached a point where the future was in the hands of others. It was an unsettling feeling, but also one that was freeing. Musk had always known that he was part of a larger narrative, one that was shaping the course of human history. But now, as he took a step back from the constant pressure of leadership, he could see that the true impact of his work would not be measured by his own actions alone. It would be measured by the people who would follow in his footsteps, who would build upon the foundations he had laid. One afternoon, sitting at his desk at Tesla's headquarters, Musk looked out the window at the bustling campus. Engineers and designers walked briskly past, their minds filled with the next breakthrough, the next step toward revolutionizing the world. For a moment, Musk just watched them, a sense of quiet pride settling over him. The world was changing, and it was changing because of the collective effort of so many individuals working together. SpaceX wasn't just a company anymore. It was a symbol of human ingenuity and the spirit of exploration. Tesla was no longer just an electric car manufacturer. It was a beacon of hope for a sustainable future. The world was moving forward, and Musk's role in it was shifting. No longer the lone visionary at the center of it all, he had become a guiding force, an inspiration to those who would carry his legacy into the next phase of human progress. But even as he reflected on the future, Musk couldn't help but feel a sense of humility. He had always been driven by a desire to change the world, to leave a mark on history. But as he sat in that quiet moment, he realized that the mark he was leaving was not one that could be measured in accolades or awards. It was a mark that would be felt by future generations, by those who would inherit the dreams he had set in motion. It wasn't about the recognition. It was about the impact. It was about knowing that, years from now, when humanity reached Mars, or when the world's energy grid was powered by renewable sources, it would be because of the work that had begun here and now. And in that moment of reflection, Musk realized that this was what he had always wanted, to make a difference. Not for fame, not for fortune, but for the future of humanity. His work wasn't finished, but it had evolved. The foundation had been set. The next generation of leaders would carry the torch, and Musk would remain in the background, watching from afar, knowing that the work he had started would continue long after he was gone. There would always be new challenges to face, new frontiers to explore. SpaceX and Tesla, the companies he had built, would continue to push the boundaries of human achievement. But they would do so not because of him, but because of the people he had inspired, the people who had taken his vision and made it their own. Musk smiled as he leaned back in his chair, a deep sense of satisfaction filling him. It wasn't the satisfaction of having reached the summit. It was the satisfaction of knowing that he had set the stage for others to climb higher. The world was changing, and the future was in good hands. And in that quiet moment, Musk knew that the best was yet to come. Musk's health had improved, and with it, his ability to return to his work in a way that was no longer as consuming as before. He was no longer running day-to-day operations or micromanaging every decision. He had passed the torch, but that didn't mean his fire had gone out. Instead, it had shifted from the relentless pursuit of progress to a broader, deeper vision for the future. He was no longer the person at the center of everything. Now, he was more of an architect of ideas, watching his vision unfold through the people he had surrounded himself with. SpaceX, now fully engaged in its Mars mission, was making steady progress toward its goal of interplanetary travel. It was no longer a distant dream but a tangible reality, with Starship flights scheduled for the next decade. The team's commitment to the goal was unwavering, and the technology Musk had once pushed to the forefront of innovation was being refined and tested at levels that exceeded even his own expectations. Musk had always said that humanity's future lay beyond Earth, and with every successful test flight, every new milestone, that idea was becoming more and more plausible. Tesla, too, was evolving. The electric car company had far surpassed the milestone of being a niche manufacturer of futuristic vehicles to becoming a global leader in the renewable energy sector. Its reach had extended beyond electric cars to solar energy, battery storage solutions, and innovations in energy grid technology. The company was no longer just an automaker. It had become a symbol of the future of clean energy, playing a critical role in helping the world transition away from fossil fuels. But Musk's gaze had begun to shift as well. Though his companies were thriving, he had begun to feel the call of something even greater than space exploration or sustainable energy. His ventures had accomplished more than most ever thought possible, but there was a growing sense within him that there was still so much left to explore. He had helped push humanity to the brink of interplanetary travel and a sustainable energy future, but the possibilities were infinite. And so, Musk began thinking bigger. It was during a quiet dinner with friends and colleagues that Musk first voiced his thoughts aloud. "I've been thinking," Musk said as he looked out over the city skyline, "about the future of humanity, about how we continue to evolve, not just as individuals, but as a species. We've done so much with SpaceX and Tesla, but I think we're on the verge of something even bigger." The room fell quiet, everyone looking at Musk with curiosity. "You've already pushed the boundaries of space and energy," one of his colleagues, a prominent scientist from Tesla, said. "What more could there possibly be?" Musk smiled, a gleam in his eye. "What if we could integrate the best of all of our technologies, space exploration, sustainable energy, AI, into something that could accelerate human evolution? What if we could use technology to fundamentally improve the human experience?" The idea Musk was beginning to articulate was still nebulous, but it was one that resonated with everyone in the room. He wasn't just thinking about building spaceships or energy grids anymore. He was thinking about how technology could alter the very nature of humanity itself. For years, Musk had been fascinated by the potential of artificial intelligence and its ability to enhance human capabilities. He had always envisioned a future where humans were no longer limited by their biology, where they could transcend their physical constraints and enhance their abilities through technology. Neuralink, his brain-computer interface company, was still in its infancy, but the possibilities it presented were staggering. What if, through Neuralink, humans could not only communicate faster and more efficiently, but also enhance their cognitive abilities and improve their mental well-being? This was the next frontier Musk saw, a world where technology and biology merged seamlessly. A world where humans could use advanced neurotechnology to tap into their full potential, where AI could work alongside people to help solve humanity's greatest problems. This was more than just a vision. It was a mission that could redefine what it meant to be human. "I want to create a future where humanity isn't just surviving," Musk continued, "but thriving in ways we never thought possible. A world where we've moved beyond our limitations and are able to solve our biggest challenges with the best of our technology. A future where AI, brain-computer interfaces, and space exploration all work together to create something truly extraordinary." His words hung in the air, and the room was filled with an energy that Musk hadn't felt in a long time. He wasn't just thinking about one company or one project anymore. He was thinking about a complete transformation, a future where humanity could push the boundaries of what was possible in ways that no one could have predicted. But Musk wasn't blind to the risks. He knew that such a vision wouldn't come without challenges. The ethical implications of merging AI and human biology, the potential dangers of advanced neurotechnology, and the unknown consequences of such a dramatic shift in human capabilities. These were all issues that weighed heavily on his mind. "I'm not naive," Musk said, his tone serious. "I know there are risks, but I believe that the potential benefits far outweigh them. We're at a crossroads in human history. We've always faced challenges, but now we have the technology to tackle them in ways that were once thought impossible." The team around him listened intently, their faces illuminated by the city lights, reflecting the same sense of possibility that Musk had always carried. It was clear that they weren't just thinking about what was currently achievable. They were beginning to think about what was possible in a world where humanity could reshape its own future. And so, Musk's vision for the future expanded, encompassing not just interplanetary travel or clean energy, but the very evolution of humanity itself. He wasn't just thinking about the next big breakthrough in technology. He was thinking about how technology could transform the human experience. This was the next great frontier for Musk, the intersection of AI, biotechnology, and human evolution. And with that realization, he knew that the work he had started was far from finished. In fact, it was only just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As Musk's thoughts on human evolution and technology began to crystallize into a clearer vision, the journey toward this new frontier wasn't without its hurdles. The stakes were higher than ever. The technologies Musk was now exploring, artificial intelligence, brain-computer interfaces, and even genetic engineering, were not only complex but controversial. As the boundaries between biology and technology blurred, so too did the ethical dilemmas that surrounded them. Musk had always been someone unafraid to push boundaries, to take risks, but even he knew that this new endeavor would test every fiber of his being. The question was no longer just whether humanity could reach Mars or transition to renewable energy. It was about whether humanity could use technology to transcend its biological limitations. Could humans and machines coexist in a way that enhanced human potential without losing what made us human? Could they control this powerful technology without it controlling them? The first signs of resistance came not from external critics, but from within his own team. As they began to explore the development of advanced neural interfaces, some engineers at Neuralink, the company Musk had founded to develop brain-machine interfaces, began voicing concerns about the pace at which they were moving. "I think we're going too fast," said Rachel, one of Neuralink's lead engineers, a brilliant neuroscientist who had spent years studying the ethical ramifications of neurotechnology. "We're talking about altering the very essence of the human brain. What happens if we get it wrong? What happens if this technology is misused?" Musk looked at her, his gaze steady. "I understand your concerns, Rachel, but we can't afford to wait. The world is changing too quickly, and the challenges ahead are too big. Climate change, resource depletion, diseases we can't even predict yet. We have to prepare humanity for the future, and that means using every tool at our disposal." But Rachel wasn't convinced. "I know you're thinking about the bigger picture, Elon, but we need to proceed carefully. This technology has the potential to change humanity, yes, but it also has the potential to cause irreparable damage. We can't just rush into this without considering the consequences." Musk had heard these arguments before, but they were more pronounced now, as the stakes had escalated. It wasn't just about building electric cars or rockets anymore. It was about reshaping the very fabric of human existence. The future of humanity itself was now tied to the choices he made in the present. "Are we doing this because we can," Rachel continued, "or because we should?" That was the heart of the conflict Musk now found himself facing. He had always been driven by the need to solve humanity's greatest problems, but this was a whole new ballgame. If he and his team moved forward, they would be on the cutting edge of something truly revolutionary. But it was also uncharted territory. The ramifications, good and bad, were impossible to predict. Musk, for the first time in a long time, paused. He wasn't used to being questioned so directly by his own team. He had always prided himself on being the visionary, the one with the answers, the one who saw the future before anyone else. But now, as he looked around at the faces in the room, each one filled with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, he realized that this new chapter in his life wasn't going to be as simple as all the others. "I've always been the one to take risks," Musk finally said, breaking the silence. "But I know this isn't just about me anymore. It's about all of us. We can't just ignore the risks. But we can't let fear hold us back, either. If we don't move forward, we'll never know what's possible." Rachel sighed, shaking her head. "I'm not saying we should stop. I'm just saying we need to think this through. It's easy to get swept up in the excitement of new technology, but what happens when it goes wrong?" Musk could see the concern in her eyes. He had faced moments of doubt before. There had been times when SpaceX's rockets were exploding in midair, when Tesla was struggling to meet production goals. But those were technical challenges, solvable problems. This, however, felt different. This was about something much more profound, something that would affect the very nature of humanity. "I understand," Musk said quietly, "but sometimes we have to push forward, even when we don't have all the answers. That's how breakthroughs happen. And if we don't do it, someone else will. We can't let fear hold us back from solving the biggest problems humanity faces." The tension in the room was palpable. Rachel, though still uneasy, nodded slowly. She understood the weight of Musk's words, but she still feared the implications of moving too quickly. Over the following weeks, as Neuralink's projects gained momentum, Musk found himself spending more time in deep conversations with his team. They delved into the ethical questions surrounding the technology, debating the potential benefits and dangers of altering the human brain. The discussions became heated at times, but they were necessary. Musk knew that the path they were on was one that demanded not only technical expertise but philosophical and moral consideration as well. Meanwhile, other parts of his vision were beginning to take shape. Tesla's work on energy storage and solar technology was advancing rapidly, with new breakthroughs in battery efficiency that promised to make the transition to sustainable energy even faster. SpaceX, too, was inching closer to its goal of interplanetary colonization, with the first crewed missions to Mars just a few years away. But through all of it, Musk couldn't shake the feeling that the most important work was happening on the frontiers of human evolution. The integration of AI and brain-computer interfaces would determine not just how humanity advanced, but whether it could continue to thrive in an increasingly complex world. The stakes were high, and Musk knew that this journey wasn't going to be easy. And yet, despite the mounting pressure and uncertainty, one thing was clear. Musk had never been more certain of his mission. The challenges ahead were daunting, but the possibility of creating a future where humanity could transcend its biological limitations, where technology could unlock the full potential of the human mind, that was the future he believed in, the future he was willing to fight for. As the weeks turned into months, the tension at Neuralink only grew. The team's concerns over the ethical implications of brain-computer interfaces were valid, but Musk couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing the bigger picture. They were consumed by fear of the unknown, of what might go wrong, rather than focusing on the transformative potential of what could go right. Musk had spent his entire career walking the fine line between fear and progress, between uncertainty and unrelenting ambition. This was no different. But, as the project pushed forward, the divide within the company deepened. There were those who stood by Musk's vision, convinced that humanity was on the brink of a new era, one where the merging of mind and machine could eliminate the very limitations that had kept humans grounded for millennia. Then, there were others who, despite their admiration for Musk, were unwilling to ignore the growing risks that came with such a monumental leap. The emotional toll on Musk was beginning to show. He had always been someone who believed that he could carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. But now, as he faced mounting resistance from within his own ranks, he found himself questioning if he could really achieve what he had set out to do. The vision was clear, but the path ahead was uncertain, and he was beginning to feel the pressure of balancing ambition with the responsibility of it all. One night, after another heated meeting with the Neuralink team, Musk walked the halls of Tesla's headquarters in a daze. The lights flickered above him, casting long shadows on the polished floors. The hum of activity in the building had quieted for the evening, leaving him alone with his thoughts. He paused in front of a large window that overlooked the sprawling factory floor below. The empty space was a symbol of the work that lay ahead, of the dream that still needed to be realized. Musk had spent years building companies that were reshaping the world. SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink. But now, standing in that quiet room, he realized that none of it would matter if humanity couldn't come together to ensure the future he envisioned was safe and sustainable. As he stood there, a sharp realization hit him. He was no longer alone in this fight. His ambitions were no longer just his own. The future of humanity was at stake. The stakes had always been high, but now they felt impossibly higher. He couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. This was bigger than rockets or electric cars. This was about ensuring that humanity would thrive, not just survive. This was about ensuring that the future they built would not be one of machines controlling humans, but one of symbiosis, where technology worked in harmony with the human mind, not at the expense of it. Suddenly, the door to the hallway opened behind him. Musk turned to see Rachel walking toward him. Her face was soft, yet her eyes held an intensity that Musk knew well. She had been his biggest skeptic on this journey, but he respected her more than anyone. She had always been honest with him, even when it was hard. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. Musk nodded, stepping away from the window to face her. The silence between them was heavy, the kind of silence that spoke volumes. Rachel had been with him from the beginning of Neuralink, and despite their disagreements, she had never wavered in her belief that they were working on something that could change the world. But even she was starting to doubt whether they were ready for this kind of leap. "I'm not sure we're ready," Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know you believe in this vision, Elon, but I can't shake the feeling that we're rushing into something that we don't fully understand." Musk looked at her, his eyes filled with the weight of his own thoughts. "I've spent my life trying to solve the world's biggest problems, Rachel. From sustainable energy to space exploration, every step has been about pushing humanity forward. But now I'm asking myself if we're doing the right thing, if we're going too fast." Rachel sighed and stepped closer. "I think we're both asking ourselves that," she said. But the reality is, if we go too far without understanding the consequences, we could create a world where we lose control. Where we've advanced so far, we can't go back. Musk's mind raced. What if Rachel was right? What if the dream he had spent so long nurturing was destined to end in a dystopia? A world where technology consumed humanity instead of elevating it. He felt a knot in his stomach. This wasn't just about building something new. It was about the very survival of humanity. If they got this wrong, it could mean the end of everything they had worked for. I don't want to lose control, Musk said, his voice tinged with emotion. I don't want to build something that's too dangerous to exist. But I also don't want to leave humanity behind. I want to push us forward, into a future that's better for all of us. I want us to transcend our limitations, not be held back by them. Rachel watched him carefully, the tension in her eyes softening. I believe in your vision, Elon. I do. But I think we need to take a step back and figure out how we can move forward responsibly. We can't just blindly rush ahead. For the first time in months, Musk felt the weight of the situation sink in. He had always been someone who believed in bold, audacious moves. But now he understood that in order to achieve true greatness, he needed to temper that ambition with wisdom. I've been so focused on the endgame, Musk admitted, his voice softening. But maybe it's time we focus on the process, too. We can't just fix the future. We have to build it carefully, step by step. As the two stood in the quiet hallway, an unspoken understanding passed between them. Musk knew this was just the beginning of a long, difficult journey. One that would require not only his ambition, but also the caution and responsibility that Rachel had always championed. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined, but for the first time, he felt like he wasn't alone in carrying that weight. The days following Musk's conversation with Rachel were filled with a deep sense of contemplation. He found himself walking through the Tesla factory with a new understanding, his mind shifting from the relentless pursuit of progress to the careful consideration of how to responsibly guide humanity into the future. The lessons learned from his earlier ventures had prepared him for many challenges, but this was different. It wasn't just about rockets or electric cars. It was about how to navigate the ethical minefield of reshaping the very essence of human existence. Musk had always been a man driven by ambition, but this time, he realized that ambition alone wasn't enough. Responsibility, care, and reflection were just as crucial. It wasn't just about the breakthrough itself, but how it would impact the world. He had been so focused on what humanity could achieve that he had neglected the deeper questions. What was the true cost of progress? What would this new form of human evolution mean for society as a whole? In the weeks that followed, Musk took a step back from the frenetic pace of Neuralink's development. Instead of diving headfirst into the next technological breakthrough, he dedicated his time to having candid conversations with experts in fields ranging from philosophy to bioethics to understand the full scope of what he was attempting to do. He wanted to hear every perspective, especially the ones that challenged his own. What were the unintended consequences of his work? Was there a way to make it safer, to ensure that this future he envisioned would truly benefit all of humanity? One of those experts, Dr. Martin Henson, a leading bioethicist who had worked on the implications of genetic engineering, shared a perspective that struck Musk deeply. Technology isn't inherently good or bad, Elon, Dr. Henson explained. It's a tool, and its impact depends on how we choose to use it. But when it comes to altering the human mind, we're dealing with something far more delicate than any machine. Humans are not just components to be optimized. They are complex, emotional beings. The mind isn't a system to be hacked. It's something to be respected and understood. Musk listened carefully, feeling the weight of the words. For so long, he had viewed technological progress as the ultimate solution to humanity's greatest challenges. He had been so focused on the what and the how that he hadn't given enough thought to the why and the who. Who would benefit from this technology? Who would be left behind? And who would be responsible for making sure that it was used wisely? By the time Musk returned to Neuralink, he had a new sense of purpose. His vision hadn't changed, but his approach had. He would move forward with the brain-computer interface technology, but with a much more deliberate and cautious approach. He would ensure that the ethical concerns were addressed and that safeguards were in place. This wasn't just about changing the world. It was about making sure the world was ready for this kind of change. The first step in his new approach was to bring together a multidisciplinary team of thinkers and innovators who could help guide Neuralink's work in a responsible direction. He formed an advisory board that included ethicists, psychologists, sociologists, and even artists, people who could think beyond the immediate technological applications and understand the broader impact on humanity. The second step was to slow down the pace of development. While this wasn't a decision Musk made lightly, he understood that in order to create something truly transformative, he needed to take the time to get it right. He instructed the Neuralink team to conduct extensive studies on the psychological and societal implications of brain-computer interfaces, working with independent researchers to ensure the technology was safe and beneficial for all. It wasn't an easy decision. Musk had always been someone who pushed the limits of what was possible, often willing to take risks others wouldn't dare to consider. But in this case, he understood that slowing down was the only way to ensure the technology would benefit humanity as a whole, rather than just a select few. The third step was to be transparent. Musk knew that public perception was critical to the success of Neuralink, especially as the technology gained more attention. He began speaking publicly about the importance of responsibility and caution, addressing the ethical concerns head-on. He acknowledged the risks involved in altering the human brain, but he also made it clear that the goal was to improve humanity's quality of life, not to create a world where technology ruled over people. Progress isn't just about getting to the future as quickly as possible, Musk said in a public statement. It's about ensuring that the future we create is one we're all ready for. It's about making sure that no one gets left behind, and that we approach these technologies with the utmost respect for the human experience. The response from the public and the media was mixed. Some hailed Musk's newfound sense of responsibility as a sign of maturity and foresight, while others were skeptical that he could truly balance innovation with caution. But Musk knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be critics, there would be setbacks, and there would be moments of doubt. But he had learned a valuable lesson. Progress without responsibility could lead to unintended consequences. And it was his job, not just as an innovator but as a human being, to ensure that the world was ready for the future he had dreamed of. As the months passed, Musk continued to oversee the development of Neuralink, SpaceX, and Tesla with a renewed sense of purpose. He was still the driving force behind each company, but his focus had shifted from simply achieving breakthroughs to ensuring that those breakthroughs were sustainable and beneficial for all. He was no longer just looking at the future. He was looking at how to shape it in a way that was thoughtful, compassionate, and, above all, responsible. And with that shift in mindset came a newfound sense of peace. Musk knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but for the first time, he felt confident that the vision he had once dreamed of so recklessly was now within reach, not just for him, but for all of humanity. As he stood before the teams at Neuralink, SpaceX, and Tesla, Musk couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The journey had been long, and it had been fraught with obstacles, but now, as he looked out at the people who shared his vision, he knew that together, they could build a future that was better than anything he could have ever imagined on his own. The future wasn't just about technology. It was about humanity. And as long as he could help guide that future with integrity and wisdom, Musk knew that his mission would never truly be complete. The new direction Musk had taken was not without its challenges. Though he had made the decision to move forward more slowly, the pace of progress at Neuralink seemed to stall in some areas. It was frustrating. Musk was a man who had built his career on rapid development and constant forward momentum. But now, with his newfound commitment to caution and ethical responsibility, there were days when the forward motion seemed almost agonizingly slow. At Neuralink, the team had been focused on the first practical use of their brain-machine interface, a system that could help people with neurological disorders like paralysis regain basic motor function. Early trials had shown promising results, with the interface allowing people to control prosthetic limbs with nothing more than their thoughts. It was a breakthrough that could change the lives of millions of people worldwide, but it also came with its own set of risks. Risks that Musk was now determined to address before pushing the technology any further. For months, Musk and his team had been conducting more rigorous tests, working with neurologists and bioethicists to ensure the interface was as safe as possible. But as they moved into more advanced stages, new complications arose. There were concerns about the long-term effects of such invasive technology on the human brain. What might happen years down the line when neural interfaces were used by millions of people? Musk had often said that progress required risk, but now he was starting to see the truth in Rachel's warnings. The risks weren't just technical, they were human. What did it mean for someone to have a machine permanently embedded in their brain? What if that technology was hacked? Or worse, what if it changed the way people thought and felt in ways they couldn't control? The ethical dilemmas seemed endless. The possibilities were both exciting and terrifying. And for every breakthrough, there were new questions that needed answering. Musk found himself at a crossroads. He had made a commitment to his team, to humanity, to move forward responsibly, but the consequences of that responsibility were becoming harder to manage. The breakthroughs Neuralink was on the verge of achieving could revolutionize the medical field. But could they also open a Pandora's box that humanity wasn't ready to handle? One evening, as Musk sat in his office at Tesla, looking over the latest Neuralink progress reports, he felt the weight of the decisions he had made and the consequences of them. His mind raced, and for the first time in months, the question he had been avoiding came to the forefront of his thoughts. What if we're wrong? The idea of failure, of making a catastrophic mistake that would harm countless lives, was a possibility he had never truly considered in this context. He had failed before. He had built companies from the ground up, only to watch them collapse. But this felt different. This wasn't about building a rocket or an electric car. This was about altering the fabric of human consciousness itself. This was about the core of what made people human. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Musk looked up to see Rachel standing in the doorway, her expression as serious as ever. "Can we talk?" she asked. Musk motioned for her to come in, and she took a seat across from him. There was a quiet tension between them, a silence that had lingered since their last conversation. Musk knew that this moment was inevitable. He had been avoiding it, but Rachel was right. They couldn't continue on this path without addressing the potential risks head-on. "You've been quiet lately," Rachel began, her voice gentle. "I know this is hard. The technology you're building at Neuralink could change the world in ways we can't even imagine. But there's always a cost. And right now, I think we need to figure out what that cost might be." Musk nodded, his gaze shifting toward the window. He could feel the weight of her words, the gravity of what they were talking about. It wasn't just the technology they had created. It was what it meant for the future. What would society look like when people could control machines with their minds? What would it mean for the future of work, relationships, and even identity itself? "I've been thinking a lot about that," Musk admitted. "We've spent so much time focused on the what and the how, but we haven't given enough thought to the why we're doing this, and who gets to decide how it's used. I want to help people. I want to build something that can change lives for the better. But what if it ends up causing more harm than good?" Rachel leaned forward. "Exactly. We're playing with fire here, Elon. The potential for good is enormous, but so is the potential for harm. And if we're not careful, we could end up creating a world where people lose themselves, where their thoughts, their actions, their very identities are controlled by a machine." Musk felt a pang in his chest. He had always known that the future would be complicated, that there would be unintended consequences of his work, but now he realized just how true that was. The path ahead was murky, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for the consequences. "We need to be smarter," Rachel continued. "We need to slow down. We need to build safeguards into this technology, not just to protect people from external threats, but to protect them from the technology itself. We can't just push ahead and hope for the best." Musk sat in silence for a moment, taking in her words. For the first time in a long while, he felt a deep sense of doubt. Had he been too focused on the endgame? Had he neglected the very real risks involved in this new frontier? "Maybe we've been too focused on the future," Musk said finally. "Maybe we need to look at the present and ask ourselves if we're really ready for what comes next." Rachel smiled, a small but reassuring smile. "I think that's the first step." Musk leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. The journey ahead was still unclear, but he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about creating technology. It was about creating a future that humanity could embrace without losing its soul. As the conversation ended, Musk felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, he felt that he had a clearer understanding of the path forward. The world was changing, and the questions they were asking were more important than ever. But Musk now knew that they had to approach the future with caution, care, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was best for humanity. As the months stretched on, Musk began to feel a growing sense of urgency. While he had slowed down the pace of Neuralink's developments, the world outside had not stopped moving. Competitors were emerging, pushing forward with their own advancements in the realm of brain-computer interfaces, and even governments were starting to take notice. The race for technological dominance was intensifying, and Musk knew that Neuralink had to remain at the forefront if it was to achieve its world-changing potential. Despite the mounting pressure, Musk remained committed to his new approach. The balance between ethical considerations and innovation was delicate, and he knew that rushing would be a grave mistake. Yet, as his team worked tirelessly to improve the brain-machine interface, Musk couldn't ignore the growing divide within the company. It wasn't just the external pressure that weighed heavily on him. It was the internal conflict that was beginning to simmer beneath the surface. There were members of the Neuralink team who had been with Musk from the beginning, who shared his grand vision of creating a future where humanity could transcend its physical limitations. But there were also those who had begun to question whether the risks were truly worth the reward. They wanted to push the technology forward at a faster pace, to see results and make history. They believed that they could mitigate the risks after the technology was fully developed, but Musk was unwilling to take that leap of faith. The tension between the two factions within Neuralink grew more. Dr. Carson's face tightened, but she didn't respond. The room was filled with an uncomfortable silence as the team processed Musk's words. It was clear that there were no easy answers, no simple solutions. The future of Neuralink and the future of humanity was at a crossroads. The meeting ended shortly after, and as the team dispersed, Musk found himself lost in thought. He knew that he was facing the most critical decision of his career. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Moving too slowly could allow competitors to surpass them. Moving too quickly could put everything at risk. That evening, as Musk walked through the darkened halls of Tesla's headquarters, his mind raced. He could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of the world on his shoulders. He had always thrived under pressure, but this was different. This wasn't just about business. It was about the future of humanity itself. Musk found himself standing in front of the large window once again, staring out at the city below. The lights of the skyline flickered in the distance, a reminder of how much had been accomplished and how much was still left to do. He thought about his family, his children, the world they would inherit. Would the technology he was developing make their lives better, or would it lead them down a dangerous path? As he stood there, deep in thought, Rachel's words echoed in his mind. "We can't afford to be reckless." And for the first time, Musk wondered if perhaps she was right. What if they were pushing too hard? What if they were so focused on the future that they couldn't see the dangers lurking just beneath the surface? He had always prided himself on his ability to see the big picture, to push the boundaries of what was possible. But now, he realized, the future was more complex than he had ever imagined. It wasn't just about creating something new. It was about ensuring that the world was ready for it. Musk knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. The stakes were higher than ever, and the conflict within his own team was only the beginning. But as he looked out over the city, he understood one thing. The true test of leadership wasn't about being right all the time. It was about knowing when to push forward and when to pull back. The question was, could he find that balance before it was too late? The air inside the Neuralink lab was thick with tension as the team worked through yet another long day. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, as if to remind everyone that time was running out. Musk had always thrived under pressure, but the weight of the decisions he faced now was unlike anything he had experienced before. The company was on the verge of an incredible breakthrough, but also on the edge of a precipice. If the technology succeeded, it could change humanity's future in ways that no one had ever imagined. But if it failed, the consequences could be catastrophic. Musk sat in the back of the room, observing the team as they worked in silence. His mind was spinning, torn between two worlds. The vision of a new era of human evolution that he had spent years pursuing, and the fear that this new world might be one that humanity was not ready for. The internal conflict within Neuralink had only intensified in recent weeks, and Musk found himself questioning whether the risks of pushing forward were too great. The breakthrough they were working on could restore movement to paralyzed people, but it also carried the potential for unforeseen consequences. The mind was a delicate and complex thing, and tampering with it might have effects they couldn't predict. Dr. Carson approached Musk, her face pale, her expression tight with exhaustion. She had been working tirelessly alongside the team, trying to push the brain-computer interface technology to the next level. But even she, with all her expertise, was beginning to feel the weight of the uncertainty. "Elon," she said quietly, "we've hit a wall. The neural interface is showing promising results, but the long-term effects, they're unpredictable. The brain's response to the technology is more volatile than we anticipated. We've had some breakthroughs, but there's a risk that we could be opening a door to something we're not prepared for." Musk took a deep breath, his gaze shifting from Dr. Carson to the team working in the lab. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, and for the first time, he wondered if they had gone too far. Had they become so consumed with progress that they were blinded to the real risks? Could they turn back now? "We need to be careful," Musk said, his voice low. "We've pushed humanity to the edge of something incredible, but we need to understand what's at stake before we go any further. I don't want to be the one responsible for a mistake that could change everything." Dr. Carson nodded, but there was a flicker of frustration in her eyes. "You're right, but we've also worked so hard to get to this point. This could be the breakthrough that changes the course of medicine, of human potential. If we don't act now, we risk losing everything. We risk losing the opportunity to give people their lives back." Musk's mind raced. He had always been someone who pushed the limits of possibility, who took risks others would shy away from. But this felt different. The stakes were too high. He had always said that the future was about creating a better world. But what if this was a future that no one was ready for? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his phone buzzing on the table. He picked it up and glanced at the screen. It was a message from Rachel. "Elon, we need to talk. Now." Musk's stomach tightened. He knew what that message meant. Rachel had been his voice of reason, the one person who had consistently urged him to slow down, to take a step back. And now, it seemed, the moment of reckoning had arrived. Musk stood up abruptly, his mind racing. He excused himself from the lab and made his way to the conference room where Rachel was waiting. He found her sitting at the table, her expression grave. She didn't need to say anything for Musk to know that things were reaching a breaking point. "Is it time to pull the plug?" Rachel asked, her voice calm but tinged with concern. Musk took a deep breath and sat down across from her. He hadn't wanted to admit it, but he knew deep down that the time had come. The decision he had been avoiding, whether to continue pushing forward or to take a step back, had reached its climax. The tension, the uncertainty, the risks, they were no longer abstract concepts. They were real, tangible forces that threatened to undo everything. "I don't know," Musk replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if we're ready. We've worked so hard, but I can't ignore the risks anymore. What if we're not just changing the future? What if we're gambling with it? What if we've gone too far?" Rachel reached across the table and placed a hand on Musk's. The gesture was simple, but in that moment, it carried a depth of understanding. "You've built so much, Elon. But this isn't just about your vision. This is about the future of everyone. You don't have to do this alone." Musk met her gaze, his mind racing. This wasn't just about technology anymore. This wasn't about being the first to build a revolutionary device or to create a new era of human evolution. This was about the responsibility he had to humanity, to every person who would be affected by this technology. The weight of that responsibility was suffocating. "I've always believed in the potential of this technology," Musk said quietly. "I still do. But I don't know if we're ready. Maybe I'm not ready." Rachel squeezed his hand, her voice steady. "It's okay to not have all the answers, Elon. You've already done more than anyone could have imagined. But this, right now, it's about asking the right questions. It's about ensuring that we don't rush into something that could change everything for the worse." Musk closed his eyes for a moment, letting her words sink in. The emotional toll of the decision weighed heavily on him, but he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about technology, it was about humanity. And in that moment, he realized that no matter how much he had accomplished, no matter how far he had pushed the boundaries of what was possible, he couldn't afford to make a mistake now. For the first time in months, Musk felt a sense of clarity. The breakthrough wasn't just about achieving something extraordinary. It was about ensuring that this technology would benefit everyone, not just a select few. It was about doing the right thing, not the easy thing. I think we need to pause, Musk said, his voice steady but resolute. We need to step back, take a deep breath, and figure out what we've really created here. We can't rush this. We need to make sure we're doing this for the right reasons. Rachel smiled, a sense of relief washing over her. She had been waiting for Musk to come to this realization, and now, it seemed, he had. It's the right decision. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is nothing at all. But this is what's best for the future. As Musk sat back in his chair, the weight on his shoulders didn't feel quite as heavy. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of peace. He knew the journey ahead would still be difficult, but he was no longer alone in facing the challenges. He had the support of those who believed in him, not just as an innovator, but as a human being who cared deeply about the future of humanity. The decision had been made. Now, the real work would begin. And Musk was ready. The decision to pause was not an easy one, but it felt like a necessary step for Musk. He had spent years cultivating the dream of revolutionizing human potential with Neuralink, and yet, the weight of the risks had become impossible to ignore. The stakes were simply too high for blind optimism, no matter how compelling the vision of the future. This wasn't just about the next breakthrough. It was about ensuring that humanity's future wasn't being gambled on technology that wasn't ready. In the days following the pivotal meeting with Rachel, Musk felt the presence of doubt lingering in the air. Some of his closest allies within the company had voiced their concern about the decision to slow things down. They believed it was a temporary setback, a necessary pause before the final push to launch. But to Musk, it was more than that. It was a chance to truly reflect on what Neuralink's mission was supposed to accomplish. Was this a race to be the first, or a responsibility to ensure the technology was used for the greater good? As the weeks passed, Musk immersed himself in reflection. His team had paused the more intensive research initiatives, focusing instead on refining their approach and listening to external experts who had been skeptical of Neuralink's rapid advancement. They held meetings with ethicists, neuroscientists, and medical professionals to evaluate the broader implications of their work. Musk knew that if Neuralink was truly going to fulfill its potential, it had to be done with precision, with careful consideration for both its benefits and its dangers. The internal conflict within Neuralink, while still palpable, began to soften. Team members who had previously been vocal about the need for faster progress found themselves aligning more with Musk's cautious approach. The pressure to be first in line with a marketable product was intense, but they all knew that no product, no matter how groundbreaking, was worth the risk of causing harm. Musk's decision had been a difficult one, but in the end, it allowed the team to align with their broader mission, to improve lives, not just for the sake of innovation, but for the safety and well-being of everyone who might one day rely on this technology. One morning, after weeks of deep introspection, Musk found himself once again standing in front of the vast window of his office in Tesla's headquarters. The sprawling city below looked different now. It no longer seemed like a racetrack where he had to outpace everyone else. Instead, it looked like a community of people, some of whom might one day depend on the very technology he was helping to create. For the first time in a long while, Musk felt a sense of peace. He was no longer focused on winning the race or being the first to reach the finish line. Instead, he was focused on the long term, on the enduring impact his work could have on the world. In that moment, Musk realized that true innovation wasn't about rushing to change the world. It was about making sure that the change you were bringing was meaningful, responsible, and sustainable. His phone buzzed again, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Rachel. "Elon, I think we're ready. Let's talk." Musk smiled. In the weeks since their last conversation, Rachel had been instrumental in helping guide the company through the pause. Her calm, steady presence had helped the team refocus, and now it seemed like they were on the verge of something new, something that felt right, not rushed. Musk stood up, walked out of his office, and headed toward the meeting room where Rachel and a few other key team members had gathered. As he entered, he was greeted with a room full of people who shared the same vision. Their faces were tired but hopeful. They were no longer fighting for a quick win. They were fighting for a legacy. "We've done the work," Rachel said, her voice steady. "We've addressed the ethical concerns, we've improved the safeguards, and we're moving forward with a plan that ensures the technology will be used safely and responsibly. We're ready." Musk nodded, his chest tightening with emotion. He could feel the weight of their collective effort in the room. This wasn't just about a technology. It was about their commitment to making a real difference. They weren't just creating a product, they were changing the course of human evolution. "I'm proud of all of you," Musk said, his voice thick with emotion. "This wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. We've done more than just pause. We've made sure that when we do move forward, it's with a clear understanding of the responsibility we bear. The world needs what we're building, but it also needs to know that we are doing it with care." The team exchanged glances, nodding in agreement. Musk could see the determination in their eyes. They were ready to take the next step, but it was no longer about rushing ahead to be first. It was about doing this right, ensuring that the technology was safe, ethical, and ready for the world. For the next few months, Neuralink continued to refine its technology, incorporating the feedback from external experts and working diligently to ensure that the brain-machine interface was not only effective but safe. Musk personally oversaw the process, making sure that the team's focus was on the long-term impact of their work. They conducted more trials, ran additional tests, and integrated safeguards to prevent the unforeseen consequences that had once seemed so probable. By the end of the year, Neuralink was ready to make its next major announcement. The company had successfully developed a neural interface that could not only allow people with paralysis to regain movement, but could also provide solutions to people suffering from neurological conditions such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. The technology was revolutionary, but more importantly, it was ready to be shared with the world in a responsible way. The announcement was met with a mixture of excitement and caution. The world watched as Musk stood before the crowd, speaking not just about the breakthroughs they had made, but about the journey that had brought them to this point. He spoke about the responsibility of innovation and the lessons they had learned along the way. "This is just the beginning," Musk said, his voice resolute. "We're not here to change the world overnight. We're here to change it for the better, step by step. We're here to ensure that humanity can thrive, not just survive, in the future we're building." The applause that followed was deafening, but Musk didn't hear it. His mind was already focused on the next challenge, the next step in the journey. He had made his peace with the path they had taken, and though the road ahead was still uncertain, Musk knew one thing for sure. This was a future worth fighting for. It was a quiet morning when Musk received a call that would once again change the course of his work. He had just finished his daily routine at Tesla, walking through the factory floor, checking in on his teams, when the phone buzzed on his desk. He recognized the number immediately, Dr. Rachel McAllister, Neuralink's leading neuroscientist. The urgency in her voice when he picked up the phone caught him off guard. "Elon, you need to come to the lab," she said. Her words clipped with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Something big has happened. Something we weren't expecting." Musk's heart skipped a beat. He knew that after the team's pause, they had been cautiously pushing forward with smaller-scale trials. He had hoped for steady progress, but he also knew that such breakthroughs often came with unexpected twists, some positive, others far less so. "I'll be there in 20, Musk responded before hanging up. The ride to the Neuralink lab felt longer than usual. The weight of the unknown settled over him like a storm cloud. Had they encountered a new complication with the brain-machine interface? Or had their cautious approach finally yielded results far beyond their expectations? As he stepped into the lab, the air was electric. The usual hum of machines, the low chatter of the research team, all felt different today. More intense, more charged. Musk scanned the room, his eyes quickly locking onto Rachel, who was standing near a computer screen, the expression on her face a mix of disbelief and exhilaration. "Elon, we did it," Rachel said, her voice barely a whisper. "We've cracked it. The interface, it's responding in ways we never imagined." Musk felt a rush of adrenaline. "What are you saying?" he asked, stepping closer to the screen. Dr. McAllister gestured toward the data displayed in front of them. Musk could see neural activity patterns that were unlike anything he had seen before. The brain's signals were clearer, more defined, with a level of precision they had been striving for from the very beginning. But what struck him even more was the visual representation of the patient's neural impulses. They were no longer just reacting to stimuli in the conventional way. They were actively working, adapting to the interface, and in some cases, the patient was able to control the prosthetics with a fluidity that Musk had hoped for but never fully believed would happen. "This is beyond our expectations, Elon," Rachel continued, her eyes wide with excitement. "The patients are not only gaining movement back, they're also showing signs of brain-to-brain communication. It's like they're experiencing a direct link to the prosthetics, not just as a tool, but as an extension of their own body." Musk's mind raced. For years, he had believed that Neuralink's technology could not only help restore movement, but potentially open doors to a future where the line between man and machine was no longer clear. The dream of augmenting human capabilities, even expanding beyond physical limitations, had always been at the core of his vision. Now, it seemed like that future was closer than ever. "This could change everything," Musk murmured, almost to himself. The potential of this breakthrough was staggering. This wasn't just about healing injuries or restoring movement. This was about unlocking human potential in ways that no one could have predicted. Rachel nodded, her face flushed with excitement. "We need to move forward with this cautiously, Elon. The implications are enormous, but so are the risks. We need to be careful with the next steps." Musk understood what she was saying. With every breakthrough, there were still dangers. The mind was fragile, and the balance between progress and safety was precarious. But the excitement in the lab, the energy that had been absent for so long, was undeniable. They had crossed a threshold. "We'll take it one step at a time," Musk said, his voice steady. "But this is it. We're closer than we've ever been." The team worked around the clock to test the limits of this new development. The neural interface was showing incredible promise, but with each success came new challenges. Questions that Musk had never fully considered, complications that went far beyond just the physical aspect of the technology. For the first time, the ethical dilemmas of Neuralink's ambitions began to fully surface in ways they hadn't anticipated. As Musk sat through meeting after meeting, discussing the potential applications of the new breakthrough, he began to realize that this wasn't just about restoring physical capabilities. The next phase of Neuralink's mission might involve entirely new forms of communication, new methods of sharing information, and perhaps even reshaping the very definition of what it meant to be human. Would the world be ready for that? One evening, as Musk left the lab, he found himself standing in the parking lot, looking up at the stars. The weight of the past months, the doubt, the pause, the reflection, seemed to lift. The breakthrough had given him a renewed sense of purpose, a clear direction, but it also brought with it an overwhelming sense of responsibility. He thought about the people who could benefit from the technology, those suffering from neurological disorders, those who had lost their physical independence, and those who might one day seek to enhance their minds or bodies beyond what was once considered possible. This was the future, the one he had dreamed of for so long. But it was also a future that needed to be approached with caution. Neuralink had the power to change the human experience, but with that power came immense responsibility. The breakthrough was only the beginning. Elon Musk wasn't just on the verge of creating a new technology. He was on the verge of redefining humanity's relationship with the mind itself. And that, he realized, was a journey that had only just begun. The breakthrough at Neuralink felt like a cosmic shift. An idea that had started as a distant dream was rapidly becoming a reality. But as the days passed, Musk found himself burdened with a sense of unease. The technology was incredible, yes, but it came with layers of complexity he had never fully anticipated. This wasn't just about advancing science or creating a life-changing tool for those in need. It was about changing the very fabric of human existence. As the team refined their discoveries, Musk's mind raced with questions. What were the long-term implications of brain-to-brain communication? What might be the consequences of merging human consciousness with machines? Was humanity ready to become something more than human? Despite the excitement that permeated the lab, a quiet tension hung in the air. Every team member was aware of the stakes. They were no longer just developing a product. They were laying the foundation for an entirely new chapter in human evolution. There was no turning back. Musk had always been a visionary, but even he couldn't help but feel the enormity of the challenge now. Every decision he made had the potential to affect millions of lives. The pressure was immense, and while Musk was no stranger to high-stakes situations, this was something different. This was bigger than business or innovation. This was the future of the human race, and it was in his hands. The first trials had been promising. Patients who had lost the ability to move due to paralysis were regaining control of their limbs. The neural interface was proving capable of restoring motor functions and even improving cognitive capabilities. But the potential beyond that was even more intriguing. As the team delved deeper into the data, they began to see patterns that suggested the possibility of shared neural experiences, an unprecedented breakthrough that could blur the line between individual consciousness and collective thought. But with this came a new wave of ethical dilemmas. Musk convened an emergency meeting with his core team, Rachel, Dr. Carson, and several leading ethicists who had been involved in the project from the start. He knew the time had come to address the profound questions that had been lingering in the back of his mind. It was no longer just about restoring functionality to the human body. It was about exploring the limits of the mind and how far they were willing to push. "I've been thinking a lot about where this could go," Musk began, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "The current trials are great. They're incredible, even. But we've only scratched the surface. What if we could create a world where people aren't just using prosthetics, they're merging their minds with machines? What happens when we can share thoughts, memories, emotions? What if we could go beyond healing to actual enhancement?" The room was silent for a long moment. Rachel was the first to speak. "Elon, I get the potential here. I really do. But we've always talked about Neuralink as a tool for healing, restoring people to the lives they once had. If we start talking about enhancement, we're entering dangerous territory. Who controls the technology? What happens when it's abused? And what about the people who choose not to enhance? What does that mean for society?" Musk nodded, acknowledging the concern. "I know. I've thought about that too. But what if enhancing the brain could lead to breakthroughs in solving the world's biggest problems? What if we could improve intelligence, solve diseases faster, push the boundaries of creativity and innovation? What if we could overcome human limitations and live longer, healthier lives?" Dr. Carson, who had been quietly listening, added, "Elon, you've always pushed boundaries, but the risks are so much higher now. We're not just dealing with machines anymore. We're dealing with the essence of what it means to be human. Do we want to create a world where only some people can access these enhancements? Do we want to make people's minds something that can be altered or traded like a product?" Musk's gaze drifted toward the window, where the setting sun cast a warm glow over the city below. The world was on the brink of something revolutionary. The neural interface had the potential to change everything. But did it have the potential to create a better world? "Maybe we need to be the ones to guide this," Musk said, his voice steady. "Maybe it's not about allowing the world to decide what's next, but about us deciding the direction. We have a responsibility, not just to the people who will benefit from this technology, but to everyone. We need to make sure that it's used ethically, that it's available to everyone who needs it, and that it doesn't become something that divides us." Rachel looked at him, her eyes narrowing. "You're not wrong, but we can't control everything. If we release this technology, the world will change, whether we're ready for it or not." Musk felt the weight of her words. He had always prided himself on his ability to shape the future, to guide humanity toward a brighter tomorrow. But the path ahead was increasingly uncertain. The future he had dreamed of was no longer just a lofty ideal. It was something that could either lift humanity to new heights or plunge it into chaos. "We don't have all the answers," Musk said, his voice heavy with realization. "But we do have a chance to get it right. We can't afford to make this a race to the finish line. We need to move forward cautiously, thoughtfully, with everyone in mind." The conversation lingered in the air as the team discussed their next steps. It was clear that they would have to tread carefully. Neuralink had always been about helping people, about restoring their abilities, improving their lives. But with the new developments, they were entering uncharted territory, and the risks were far greater than anyone had initially imagined. In the weeks that followed, Musk and his team continued their work. They took their time with each new discovery, ensuring that every step they took was carefully considered. Musk knew that the technology had the potential to change the world, but he also understood that the world might not be ready for such a drastic shift. They would have to move slowly, methodically, until they were certain that the world was prepared to embrace the future they were creating. Musk spent countless hours pondering the questions that had been raised. Was it ethical to enhance the human brain? What would it mean for society if only a select few had access to these technologies? Could they prevent the misuse of such power? One evening, as he sat alone in his office, looking over the latest research, Musk felt a wave of clarity. The breakthrough wasn't just about changing the way people lived. It was about ensuring that the future they were building was a future for everyone. A future where technology didn't just improve lives, but united humanity in its shared journey toward progress. The final push would be the hardest one yet, but Musk knew this was a battle worth fighting. The days following the team's intense discussions were filled with a renewed sense of purpose. After months of breakthroughs, setbacks, and moments of doubt, Neuralink had finally reached a critical juncture. Elon Musk had always believed in pushing the boundaries of possibility, but now, with the technology that could redefine what it meant to be human, he was faced with one of the most significant decisions of his career. He spent long hours poring over reports, meeting with scientists, ethicists, and government regulators. His team had made extraordinary strides in the field of brain-machine interfaces. They had restored movement to the paralyzed, enabled cognitive improvements, and opened the door to a future where people could communicate directly, share thoughts, and potentially enhance their minds. But this wasn't just about what they could do. It was about how they chose to do it. Musk had always been a visionary, thinking decades, if not centuries, ahead. But this time, as he looked at the potential of Neuralink's technology, he knew that the stakes were higher than they had ever been before. The world was standing on the edge of something extraordinary, but it was also teetering on the edge of a precipice. The question was no longer just about innovation. It was about the kind of future they wanted to create. One of the most pressing concerns was the ethical dilemma posed by the technology. As the brain-machine interface evolved, it became clear that they were not just restoring lost functions. They were pushing the boundaries of human capabilities. Could the human brain be enhanced in ways that would permanently alter the course of society? Could it lead to a world where those who could afford such enhancements would become a different class of people? More intelligent, more capable, more powerful, while the rest of humanity was left behind. Musk had spent countless nights wrestling with these questions. He had always believed that technology should be used to uplift humanity, to improve lives, and solve the world's greatest problems. But with the advent of this new technology, there was a deeper, more troubling question at hand. Could they build a world that was equitable, where everyone had access to the benefits of Neuralink's innovations, regardless of their status or wealth? This wasn't just a matter of creating something groundbreaking. It was about making sure that everyone could benefit from it. The responsibility was overwhelming, and Musk knew that he couldn't shoulder it alone. One evening, as he sat in his office, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here, he was interrupted by a knock at the door. Rachel entered, her expression thoughtful but determined. "Elon, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady. "I know you've been struggling with the direction of this project, and I get it. We're on the verge of something unprecedented, but we have to make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons. We've been given the opportunity to change the world, but how we do it matters just as much as what we're doing." Musk looked up at her, a faint smile playing at the corner of his lips. "I've been thinking the same thing. This isn't just about technology, it's about humanity. If we're going to do this, we have to do it right. It can't just be for the privileged few. It has to be something that benefits everyone." Rachel nodded, taking a seat across from him. "Exactly. We need to make sure that Neuralink is accessible. We need to partner with governments, NGOs, and the medical community to ensure that this technology is used ethically and responsibly. The risk of misuse is too great, but the potential for good is even greater." Musk sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not going to be easy. People will resist. Governments will want to control it. There will be backlash from those who fear change. But we can't let that stop us. The future we're building isn't just about us, it's about everyone. Rachel smiled, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. We've already made history, Elon. This technology has already changed lives. Now, we just have to make sure we're leading the way in the right direction. Musk sat back in his chair, deep in thought. The weight of their decision was heavy, but he knew that this was the only way forward. Neuralink had already begun to heal and enhance lives in ways that were previously unimaginable. Now it was time to make sure that these advancements were used with the highest ethical standards and with the goal of benefiting all of humanity. The following months were a whirlwind of meetings, negotiations, and collaborations. Musk and his team worked tirelessly to ensure that Neuralink's technology would be used responsibly. They partnered with medical professionals, ethicists, and policymakers to create a framework for the safe and equitable deployment of their innovations. They established clear guidelines for who would have access to the technology and under what conditions. And they worked to ensure that the technology could be adapted for use in underserved communities, giving people around the world the opportunity to benefit from the advancements they had made. As the company moved forward, Musk felt a sense of clarity and purpose that he hadn't felt before. The road ahead was still filled with uncertainty, but he was no longer afraid. The path they were walking wasn't just about changing the way people lived. It was about ensuring that the future they were creating was one in which everyone could thrive, not just survive. The world watched as Neuralink made its first public demonstration of the brain-machine interface, showcasing its potential to restore movement, enhance cognition, and even enable direct communication between minds. The response was overwhelming, with millions of people around the world witnessing the promise of this new technology. But even as the world marveled at the possibilities, Musk knew that this was just the beginning. The challenges they had faced, both technical and ethical, had prepared him for this moment. And as the technology continued to evolve, he was determined to ensure that it would be used to build a better world for all. In the end, Musk's greatest legacy would not just be the technology he had created. It would be the values and principles that guided its development. He had always believed that the future was something to be shaped, not feared. And now, with Neuralink's groundbreaking advancements, he was poised to help shape a future where humanity could transcend its limitations and achieve a new level of potential. As Musk looked out at the world, he knew that the journey was far from over. The road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but with each step, they were moving closer to a future where the impossible was no longer out of reach. And that, he realized, was a future worth fighting for. The world had changed, and so had Elon Musk. Years had passed since the breakthrough moment at Neuralink, where the team had successfully achieved a new era in brain-machine interface technology. The global response to their work had been overwhelming. Some hailed it as the greatest medical breakthrough of the century, while others feared the unprecedented implications for humanity's future. But for Musk, the journey had never been about public opinion. It had always been about pushing the boundaries of what was possible, about unlocking the future for all of humankind. As he sat in his office at Neuralink headquarters, looking out over the bustling city below, Musk reflected on the path that had brought him here. The initial idea had been so simple. What if we could merge the human mind with machines? What if we could cure paralysis, heal brain injuries, enhance cognition? But as the years passed, the technology evolved, and with it, the weight of responsibility. It wasn't just about healing or enhancing anymore. It was about rethinking what it meant to be human. Through countless trials, breakthroughs, and setbacks, Neuralink had finally achieved something truly extraordinary. They had connected the human brain to the digital world in ways no one had ever imagined. People who had once lost hope of ever moving again were walking, communicating, and living fuller lives. Patients with cognitive impairments were experiencing mental clarity and increased capabilities. But even more exciting, the technology was now enabling the kind of neural communication that once existed only in science fiction, direct brain-to-brain interaction, and perhaps, in the not-so-distant future, the possibility of merging consciousness itself. But with that progress came difficult questions. What did it mean to enhance the brain? What were the social, ethical, and political consequences of such a leap forward? The team had spent years navigating these questions, always striving to ensure that the technology would be used for the betterment of humanity, not its division. Musk had always been driven by the desire to change the world. From his early days with Zip2 and PayPal to his ventures with Tesla and SpaceX, he had never been content to simply build products. He sought to build the future. And now, with Neuralink, he had reached the pinnacle of his vision, a technology that could change the very essence of human existence. But this time, the stakes were higher. The world wasn't ready to simply accept such a monumental shift. It would take years, even decades, to fully integrate this technology into society in a way that was ethical, accessible, and beneficial to all. As Musk reflected on the past, he couldn't help but think about the journey that had led him to this point. The challenges had been immense. The technology itself had pushed the boundaries of science and engineering in ways that few could have predicted. The ethical debates, the legal hurdles, the countless sleepless nights. It had all been worth it, but it had taken a toll. He had lost friends along the way, alienated colleagues, and endured public scrutiny. But through it all, one thing had remained constant: his belief in the potential of Neuralink to change the world for the better. And that belief had fueled him through every setback, every failure, every moment of doubt. Now, as Neuralink's work continued to expand, Musk knew that the next chapter of this journey wasn't about creating new technology. It was about ensuring that the world was ready for it. They had created a groundbreaking product, but they had to continue working with governments, medical professionals, and global organizations to ensure that the technology was used responsibly. The challenges were far from over. The social implications of human enhancement were still being debated. Could the technology be democratized, or would it remain the domain of the wealthy few? Would enhanced humans create a divide between the privileged and the underprivileged? Would the fear of change lead to resistance, or could the world come together to embrace this new era? But for the first time in a long while, Musk was optimistic. Neuralink had already begun to make a difference. People who had once been confined to wheelchairs were now standing, walking, and living more fully. Those who had lost the ability to communicate due to neurological conditions were now speaking with clarity, sharing their thoughts and ideas in ways that were previously unimaginable. Musk knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but he also knew that it was a road worth traveling. He had always believed that the future was something to be shaped, not feared. And with Neuralink, he had given humanity the tools to shape its own future, one where the mind was no longer limited by the body, where communication and connection could transcend physical boundaries. As Musk looked out over the horizon, he felt a sense of fulfillment. The work was far from done, but they had built something extraordinary. Neuralink had the potential to change not just the lives of individuals, but the very course of human history. It had opened doors to new possibilities, new ways of thinking, and new ways of living. The legacy of Neuralink would not just be in the technology it had created, but in the way it had challenged the world to think differently about what it meant to be human. It was a legacy of possibility, of hope, and of a future where humanity could reach beyond its limitations and achieve things that were once thought impossible. Musk knew that this was just the beginning. The journey ahead would be long, but it would be one of discovery, innovation, and transformation. And as he looked toward the future, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a belief that, no matter the challenges, the path they had chosen was the right one. In the end, the true measure of success wouldn't be in the accolades, the wealth, or the recognition. It would be in the lives they had changed, the barriers they had broken, and the world they had helped shape. And that, Musk realized, was the legacy he had always dreamed of creating. The road ahead was still long, but with Neuralink, humanity had taken its first step into a new era, and Musk was ready to lead the way. The world had watched Neuralink's progress closely, but now, more than ever, it felt like the future was unfolding right before their eyes. The first public trials had been a stunning success. Patients who had been completely paralyzed for years were standing, walking, and moving as if they had never lost those abilities. The implications were staggering, and the excitement was palpable. But with all the hope, there was also a rising tension in the air. What would this technology mean for the world at large? Elon Musk sat in a small, private conference room, staring at a wall of data. It was overwhelming, and yet, it was only the beginning. The progress they had made with Neuralink's brain-machine interface was world-changing. Still, as always, Musk had his eyes on the bigger picture. Neuralink was no longer just a company. This technology was on the verge of redefining the boundaries of human existence. It wasn't merely about giving the paralyzed the ability to move. It was about the very idea of what humans could achieve when freed from the limitations of their bodies and minds. But with power came responsibility, and Musk understood that better than anyone. He had built companies like Tesla and SpaceX with a vision of creating a better future, but the questions surrounding Neuralink were more complicated. The idea of merging human minds with machines had sparked a deep philosophical debate. What if the technology could be used for more than just healing? Could it become a tool for human enhancement? Would the wealthy, the elite, gain access to a cognitive edge over the rest of humanity? How could they ensure that this technology didn't widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots? He rubbed his temples, deep in thought. The weight of these questions was always with him. Elon knew that the technology had the potential to be transformative for humanity. But what mattered most now was how they managed this power. "Hey Elon, can I talk to you for a second?" Rachel's voice broke through his contemplation. She was standing at the door, her expression both curious and concerned. Musk looked up, blinking away the fatigue. "Of course. Come in." Rachel entered and sat across from him, folding her arms. "I've been thinking a lot about the public trials and the positive feedback we're getting. It's amazing, right? People are literally getting their lives back." Musk smiled faintly. "It is. It's incredible, but it's also overwhelming. You know the tech's potential better than anyone, Rachel. We've only scratched the surface, and that's what scares me. We've crossed a threshold, and I don't think the world is ready for what's coming next." Rachel nodded slowly. "I know what you mean. The ethical implications are huge. We're talking about changing the fundamental nature of what it means to be human. That's going to stir some serious debates. And the reality is, we can't control how the world uses it. Just look at how fast society adopts new technologies. They move faster than we can keep up." Musk leaned back in his chair, his fingers pressed together thoughtfully. "Exactly. Every time we make a breakthrough, it feels like we're stepping into new territory. We've already seen people start discussing the possibility of cognitive enhancements, people improving their intelligence, their abilities to learn and process information. That's a game changer." Rachel hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind. "But is it a game changer for the better, Elon? What if we end up creating a divide? A world where only the privileged have access to these enhancements and the rest of humanity gets left behind? What if we create a society of enhanced elites and the rest of the population struggles to keep up?" Musk let out a long sigh, running his hand through his hair. "I've thought about that a lot, Rachel. More than I care to admit. The technology could be revolutionary, but it could also fracture society in ways we can't even predict yet. We've already seen how inequality shapes the adoption of new tech. Look at access to healthcare or education. If we don't ensure equal access to Neuralink, we could widen that gap." Rachel's gaze softened. "But you're already doing everything you can to make it accessible, right? The global outreach, working with governments, the partnerships with medical organizations, it's all part of the plan." Musk's eyes flickered. "Yes, but we need more. This has to be a global effort, not just a technological one. It's not just about making the technology available. It's about how we prepare society to embrace it responsibly. If we move too fast, we risk the technology being used as a tool for control, manipulation, and power. Which is why we need to stay ahead of the curve," Rachel replied, leaning forward. "We can't let fear hold us back. We have to push forward, just with caution. As much as we can make the world better with Neuralink, we also need to make sure that we're building the right frameworks and safeguards to protect it from misuse." Rachel entered and sat across from him, folding her arms. "I've been thinking a lot about the public trials and the positive feedback we're getting. It's amazing, right? People are literally getting their lives back." Musk smiled faintly. "It is. It's incredible, but it's also overwhelming. You know the tech's potential better than anyone, Rachel. We've only scratched the surface, and that's what scares me. We've crossed a threshold, and I don't think the world is ready for what's coming next." Rachel nodded slowly. "I know what you mean. The ethical implications are huge. We're talking about changing the fundamental nature of what it means to be human. That's going to stir some serious debates. And the reality is, we can't control how the world uses it. Just look at how fast society adopts new technologies. They move faster than we can keep up. Musk leaned back in his chair, his fingers pressed together thoughtfully. Exactly. Every time we make a breakthrough, it feels like we're stepping into new territory. We've already seen people start discussing the possibility of cognitive enhancements, people improving their intelligence, their abilities to learn and process information. That's a game changer. Rachel hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind. But is it a game changer for the better, Elon? What if we end up creating a divide? A world where only the privileged have access to these enhancements and the rest of humanity gets left behind? What if we create a society of enhanced elites and the rest of the population struggles to keep up? Musk let out a long sigh, running his hand through his hair. I've thought about that a lot, Rachel. More than I care to admit. The technology could be revolutionary, but it could also fracture society in ways we can't even predict yet. We've already seen how inequality shapes the adoption of new tech. Look at access to healthcare or education. If we don't ensure equal access to Neuralink, we could widen that gap. Rachel's gaze softened. But you're already doing everything you can to make it accessible, right? The global outreach, working with governments, the partnerships with medical organizations, it's all part of the plan. Musk's eyes flickered. Yes, but we need more. This has to be a global effort, not just a technological one. It's not just about making the technology available. It's about how we prepare society to embrace it responsibly. If we move too fast, we risk the technology being used as a tool for control, manipulation, and power. Which is why we need to stay ahead of the curve, Rachel replied, leaning forward. We can't let fear hold us back. We have to push forward, just with caution. As much as we can make the world better with Neuralink, we also need to make sure that we're building the right frameworks and safeguards to protect it from misuse. Musk smiled, though it was faint. I've been thinking about that a lot too. The world needs time. Time to adjust, time to think about what it means to be human in a world where the brain can be enhanced. We've created something powerful. Now it's time to use it wisely. The conversation lingered between them as they discussed the future of Neuralink, the public trials, and the next steps. It was clear that the journey ahead was not going to be easy. There would be obstacles, resistance, and tough questions to answer. But Musk knew that he had made the right choice by moving forward with the technology. The first successful trials were just the beginning. As the team refined the interface and explored new possibilities, the future seemed full of promise. Imagine a world where no one had to suffer from paralysis, a world where cognitive abilities were not limited by age or injury, where people could connect their minds directly and share knowledge in ways that were once thought impossible. But Musk knew that no matter how powerful the technology became, its true success would depend on how it was used. It was about creating a future that was more than just a vision. It was about making sure that everyone had a place in that future. He stared out of the window once more, his thoughts racing. There was so much to be done, so much to figure out. But for the first time in a long while, Musk felt a sense of clarity. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was one he had chosen to walk. And in that decision, he found purpose. Neuralink wasn't just a company. It was a movement, a mission to redefine what humanity could achieve. And now, with every step forward, Musk and his team were taking humanity with them. The ripple effect had already begun. It was only a matter of time before the world saw what was possible. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?